Hello, class. This is Professor Holbrook, and today we're going to talk about popular culture in Latin America, which I introduced with a little bit of classic salsa from Cuba. So let's jump right in. Today we're talking about popular culture. What is popular culture? So popular culture is the idea of music and religious beliefs and practices that are practiced by the everyday Latin Americans in rural villages and cities, perhaps in some poorer barrios in some of the big cities. This is the culture as the popular classes, not the elite, but the popular classes practice it. And so we're going to focus on a couple things like dance, for an example. A good illustration of this idea of the popular class is found in Argentina in the tango dance. Tango was born in the 1880s. It emerged among the popular classes in the marginal or poor neighborhoods in Buenos Aires, and it was a part of an emerging sense of Argentine nationhood, which is often the case for some of these distinctive dances such as samba in Brazil, salsa in Cuba and Puerto Rico, merengue in the Dominican Republic. These different dances come to represent the culture and the nation from which they emerge. Popular culture at the dawn of the 21st century is most frequently bound up with the technology of mass culture. So we need to talk a little bit about modernity. What is... Oh, I'm right behind the dancer there. Oh, well, can't be helped. Modernity in Latin America. What does that consist of? It follows a variety of different trajectories. It's complex. It's a multidimensional process. It includes, for example, the growth of cities, rapid social change, massive migration from rural areas to urban areas, which has characterized the 20th century. Some scholars have described Latin America as the firstborn of modernity because of its unique relationship to Europe as the first colonies. Latin American countries were colonies of Europe actually long before African nations or Asian nations became colonies. Nevertheless, the author of this chapter believes that Latin America is full of contradictions. No argument there. Popular culture and state formation. The cultural practices traditionally carried out by and for the peasantry, or the average people, such as artesanías, religious rituals, folk music, and dance, tend to be situated within the pre-modern or pre-capitalist cultures, according to the author. Popular culture in Latin America has been influential in the process of state formation. Because popular consciousness of national identity is usually mediated by practices such as music, dance, soccer, as another example of a popular culture item, and religious rituals. Argentine tango and Dominican merengue are a couple examples of symbols of national identity, as well as the Brazilian samba and Cuban salsa. These musical and dance forms emerged around the same period in the 1880s. Two geographically distinct areas are the Caribbean and the Southern Cone. Robin Moore puts it this way in his book on popular culture and dance. It serves as a means of real and symbolic empowerment to those who would otherwise have no voice. In 1884, for example, merengue emerged from the midst of the battles against the Haitian occupation of the Dominican Republic. Tango was born in the outskirts of Buenos Aires and was linked originally to African roots. The tango emerged as the favored dance of the social underclass of Buenos Aires. It initially was danced in bars, cafes, houses of prostitution, and milongas. Merengue's rural identity can still be found under the name of Perico Ripayo. I think I can pronounce that. Ripio. I think it's Ripayo. Perico Ripayo. Nowadays, the Perico Ripayo is considered to be the prototypic manifestation representing a dance form of the Dominican peasantry. The name derives from the brothel El Perico Ripayo, situated in the city of Santiago de los Caballeros, where in the beginning of the 20th century the merengue was first danced. It is not surprising then that the popular term ripiar and its reflexive form ripiarse have become synonymous with having a ball in the Caribbean, and the expression can be heard likewise in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic. Rafael Trujillo, who you see a picture of in the upper right there, incorporated the merengue into his electoral campaigns in the 1930s. He later went on to become a dictator of the Dominican Republic. During Trujillo's lengthy dictatorship, merengue was transmitted via radio and television broadcasts and promoted as a symbol of national expression. One of my personal favorites in the merengue and salsa genre is Juan Luis Guerra. Guerra's international success during the 1980s and up to the late 1990s have made him a contemporary Latin American icon. Guerra is aware of his role as a cultural mediator, and it's not surprising that he understands his music as representing popular sentiments and is concerned with using his popularity with a sense of responsibility towards the people, or the popular classes. In his song Visa para un Sueño, he addresses the issues of immigration within the globalization of markets. I don't know if it's going to play. Let's play a little bit of it if we can. And maybe not. No, I don't think it's going to work. Here we go. So, this is Juan Luis Guerra, a Dominican songwriter and musician. For the sake of time, we're going to move on if I can, but it's not going to let me. I think I have to pause it first, and then exit out of it, and then we'll move on. There we go. A couple of other musicians that might be considered in this category, Latin American musicians. Of course, the Cuban Celia Cruz, the Brazilian Caetano Veloso, and the Panamanian Ruben Blades. If you watch The Fear of the Walking Dead, you've probably seen him as an actor. Tango in Argentina is another example that we mentioned earlier of popular culture. Buenos Aires in the late 1880s, with its mixture of recently arrived immigrants and indigenous natives, and it also shares with the merengue the same ambiance of prostitution. In 1887, out of a population of 600,000 inhabitants, 53% were immigrants. In the 1920s, Paris fell in love with the erotic and exotic aspects of the dance, as tango reigned supreme in the entertainment venues frequented by the rich. Manuel Puig Puig uses tango in his Boquitas Pintadas, where popular music provides some of the sources and models for the narrative. The Cuban Bolero is another musical genre developed in Cuba during the 10-year War of Independence against Spain. This is 1868 through about 1888. Latin American Bolero and Salsa were the first known bolero, entitled Tristeza, or Sadness, was composed by Pepe Sanchez in 1883. Bolero was born and nurtured in Cuba, but Mexico and Puerto Rico took it to its highest levels in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, and it currently crosses national boundaries. Salsa. The origins of salsa are to be found in Cuba's son, mixed with the rumbas of African origin, while the similar syncretisms occurred in varying degrees in other countries such as the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Colombia. In other words, we're talking about 2 different genres of Cuban music: el son, which I should have capitalized there, and rumba, which was a Cuban music of African origin. So you combine the son and a rumba, and it developed into salsa. Some consider the 1971 to be the mark the birth of a musical commotion that also gave birth to a new marketing strategy to sell records. That was the year when the legendary group Fania All-Stars played in a New York nightclub called the Cheetah. While the New York created the term, it did not create the dance. Some examples of salseros are Willie Colon, Tito Puente, and Ruben Blades. There's Ruben again, who in recent years has become an actor. There's also rock and roll in Espanol. A lot of the younger generation are not really interested in samba or salsa or the traditional dances, but are more interested in rock. The most recent Latin American contribution to mass-mediated popular music is the so-called rock in Espanol. It emerged as both a sign of modernity and as a vital instrument of cultural and political resistance in nations such as Argentina, Chile, and Mexico. From 1976 through 1983, Argentina witnessed the development of rock nacional, the now legendary Charlie Garcia and Fito Páez. After the return to democracy, groups such as Soda Stereo and Los Fabulosos Cadillac arose. Mexico's Maldita Vecindad emerged in 1985, the year Mexico was in the midst of a difficult economic crisis. Since their first album, this group has criticized the Mexican government's corrupt culture and has voiced the plight of those who risk their lives to migrate to the USA. There's also a group in Colombia called Los Aterciopelados, which stands out as one of the most recognized bands of rock in Espanol. Andrea Echevarri is a powerful female lead singer, songwriter, and a charismatic presence in the male-dominated rock scene. The group took off in 1995 with their second album, El Dorado, where the bolero tradition is parodied, such as with a mixture of Latin American musical traditions such as cumbia y rancheros, among others. The third and fourth albums, Pipa de la Paz and Caribe Atómico, both received Grammy nominations. Then the unforgettable Shakira. One other female trailblazer is Shakira. While well known in Latin America and Spain since the mid-1990s for her records Pies Descalzos and Donde Están los Ladrones, the Colombian-born singer-songwriter launched her debut and English-language album Laundry Service in 2001. A discussion of rock in Espanol would not be complete without also mentioning the names of rockeros Alejandro Guzman and the singer-songwriter Eli Guerra, both from Mexico. While Guzman helped bring a rock sound into the Mexican popular music, in the late 1980s. It's tempting to want to play all these songs, but I don't think we have time, and it tends to get hung up. African rhythms, music, dance, and African diasporan religions. Latin American music often has its origins in African rhythms and dance related to the religious ceremonies and customs. For example, the origins of Salsa are to be found in Cuba's son, which is connected to the practice of Santeria. But religion itself has also undergone popular transformations in Latin America. Popular religion can be better understood as a counterculture to the modernity. And one example of this would be Brazilian candomblé. Another example, of course, would be Cuban and Puerto Rican Santeria, of which we have some fair amount here in Miami as well. Afro-diasporan religions. Brazilian candomblé comes immediately to mind when thinking of Afro-American religious manifestations, or maybe it'd be better to say Afro-Brazilian, and it is perhaps the most studied popular religious phenomenon in Latin America. And Cuban Santeria is a complex religious system derived from Yoruba beliefs and rituals in which Yoruba divinities, known as Orishas, and their corresponding Catholic saints are worshipped. El fútbol, or as they say in Brazil, el futebol. Telenovelas are considered Latin American cultural product par excellence. I guess we're going to talk about telenovelas first before we talk about football. The massive appeal of telenovelas has been translated itself into huge economic benefits for the network producing these cultural products. The Brazilian network Rede Globo has exported its own telenovelas to some 130 countries. In 2001, more than 80 million people watched Colombia's Betty La Fea. The Peruvian Simplemente Maria is another example of a popular telenovela. The telenovelas then have also evolved in relation to the ever-changing social and cultural realities so as to contribute to a perceived sense of Latin American integration. Some scholars argue that they are a new development in the process of Latin American sentimental integration, in the same manner that Tango and Bolero were before then. Keep in mind also from our previous chapters that romance novels at the end of the 19th century served a similar function. So you have literature, you have music, and telenovelas that help integrate societies around a sense of nationhood. In conclusion, we should not idealize the power of popular culture. The author believes that in the 21st century, the implementation of neoliberal policies have closed down the once public spaces dominated by the popular culture. However, popular culture always finds a way to break through modernity and neoliberal policies to influence public sentiment. According to Stuart Hall, there is a constant transcultural double movement of containment and resistance that creates cultural ambivalence and makes space for the popular. That's a mouthful, that sentence. But basically what he's saying is that it works both ways, and there's a back and forth between the attempts to contain popular culture and control it and utilize it for political purposes versus popular culture breaking through and becoming its own force for cultural change. Popular culture is in a constant antagonistic relation to dominant culture. Here are some questions for review. Which of the following is considered the Latin American cultural product par excellence? Telenovelas, soccer, salsa, or bachata? We didn't really get a chance to get into soccer or football, but it's in the chapter. If you read it, you'll see how football and soccer can contribute to a sense of popular culture? Where did the bolero develop? If you remember, it was in Cuba, to give the answer. Which of the Argentine authors feature tango in their novels? And I believe the answer to that was Manuel Puig. What percentage of the population of Argentina in 1887 was made up of immigrants? Which issues does Juan Luis Guerra address as cultural mediator in his song Visa para un Sueño? It's a very contemporary issue. I'll give you a hint. Build the wall. Besides the Argentine tango, which other popular mediums does the author mention as an important symbols of national identity? And according to this chapter, what are some of the characteristics of modernity? And what is a good example of popular culture? So that is our chapter on Latin American popular cultures. I hope you will get a chance to review, to read the chapter, and do well on the test. Get in touch with me if you have any questions. Thank you.